Welcome back to The Real AI, the show where we talk to real founders and operators about what's actually happening at the intersection of AI and businesses. Not the hype, not the LinkedIn headlines, the real stuff. Now, I'm Satopa Dwivedi. I'm the founder of ActNow360.ai. We build AI automation systems that actually execute work inside business operations. And today, I'm genuinely excited because my guest sits at one of the most interesting and consistently mishandled problems in B2B. The moment a company has to stop selling through the founder and build a real revenue engine that actually scales. And most of them get it catastrophically wrong. Now, Brent Haldiman is the founder of GTM Dart, a go-to-market execution firm based in Denver that helps B2B SaaS CEOs build revenue engines across the full stack: branding, marketing, sales, customer success, everything. Now, he's got more than 20 years in B2B SaaS sales leadership across companies like Exactly, FullContact, Birdeye, where he built businesses past $1 million in monthly recurring revenue. He's also currently embedded inside 3 active organizations simultaneously, which tells you a lot about how he thinks about leverage. Brent, welcome to the show. Really glad you're here.
Yeah, pleasure and good afternoon. Thanks for having me. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we get into your story, I want to refer something you mentioned in the pre-call, that has been sitting with me. You just said AI will never take your job ever, but it will make you better at everything. Now, I love that framing, and we're going to come back to it, but I wanted to mention that to you because I loved the way you framed it. I think it makes so much sense, and it would be so good to hear your insights on it. But first, before we move on, can you give me like a 60-second version of how do you describe GTM Dart to a founder who's never heard of it?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? The easiest way for me to explain GTM Dart is to really walk you through like what we do, what's a day in the life. And really we answer a few questions for founders. And those questions are pretty paramount to them being able to execute. One, does repeatability even exist within my organization? And what does that look like? GTM Dart finds that forward motion. We build repeatability from founders led to sales led. It's that simple motion. And we do it through leveraging things that actually work. And that's through that challenger methodology, understanding pain, and then sharing how we solve for that very specifically. So on a high value proposition, kind of a succinct way of saying it, we help founders move from founders-led sales to sales-led sales. Very simple.
Yeah, awesome. But we're going to dig deeper into that. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about your career trajectory because I found that genuinely very fascinating. It's definitely, before GTM Dart, I felt it's not like a straight line. It's almost like someone designed it to give you maximum exposure to every layer of how a B2B, revenue engine actually works. Because exactly where you were doing all incentive compensation, there was FullContact, where you were handling identity resolution and API sales. Birdeye, which is again reputation management. Intervoke, where you were VP of sales and build the business, past $1 million in MRR. Now, each of those is a completely different problem, a completely different motion. Now, was that intentional or did it just happen that way?
I love this question. It's actually the way I describe my way of selling. And I'm going to go to an experience before all those ones you just described, which I think rooted me into where I am today. And the way I explain it is every single organization I work with only competes against one thing and one thing only. And that's what I like to call traditional ways of doing things or status quo. That's the only thing I compete against every single day. When I started my sales career, I actually had to pick up a real phone and put it to my ear and push down on buttons and the whole thing. We actually had things called phone book. We didn't have this crazy internet and all this fun stuff. But also, even more importantly, the product I sold, it was paper-based. So we actually pushed paper. So it was a learning management company, right? So we did environmental health and safety, compliance, all sorts of things. Obviously, that's ripe for disruption 20 years ago. We used to sell binders. Now we have things called HCMs and LMS systems and online e-learning and all these fun things, which didn't exist back then. So really, to answer your question is, it's where I started. I started competing in spaces that taught me to only focus on pain, because in my career, I've seen quite a few changes, from moving from paper-based to online to e-learning. I also faced a lot of transitions in technology as well. I don't know if you remember Y2K. The whole world was going
Mhm.
to end, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Same
yeah.
thing, adoption of AI. I can go down long lists of things that I've competed against, but I stayed true to that. I compete against status quo.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the inspiration was way before, you all started with exactly or anywhere else. But what was the push? Like, why? Like, that was my main question. Like, is it something that motivated you? You wanted to always do something which is very, I would say, cutting edge that time? Or was it like, oh, it's just the need of the hour? What was it?
Yeah, it was always competing in a space that I knew was ripe for disruption. If you look at sales commissions, right, that's what exactly does. They compete against an Excel spreadsheet. That's all they competed against. When I was selling it exactly, I actually sent abacuses to CFOs with a sticky note on it. Inside that abacus and sticky note, it said, if you're managing your commissions through an Excel spreadsheet, you might as well be using this. So again, leaning back on that traditional thing that I learned from day one, right? Same
Yeah.
goes with FullContact and the API. When I joined FullContact, nobody even knew what the word API was. I would have to go
Exactly.
into my meetings explaining what it actually meant to a marketing
Yeah.
officer. I can go to Intervo. Nobody knows what chief science officers actually need through continuing education. But remember, I started in e-learning. So I tapped into that old
Mm.
skill set that I had to develop those motions. So each experience I've had along my journey has implanted a little bit of its DNA in my approach.
Very interesting. Now that you have touched upon the API sales, I have like when I was going through your profile, I had this question because, you weren't just selling, you were selling at the edge of what these companies were trying to figure out, right?
Mhm.
API sales at full contact, for example. Now, that's not an off the shelf sale, right? That's a developer motion instead of like a business motion conversation. So
Mhm.
you're talking to be, you're not talking to the VP of sales. You're probably talking to the developer. You're probably talking to the head of the technology. That's something most salespeople don't know, or they don't have to do it like commonly. So what did that teach you about how buyers actually think?
Yeah, it really taught me so many things. One, it taught me how to understand a day in the life. Selling through empathy, most importantly, is the really key defining motion I learned in those steps. When you have something cool and flashy at like a full contact, you can sell to a CFO and it's just a percentage point. An API is really an idea that I have to tell you the story around. So now I have to build something I like to call story leading, where now I'm identifying the pain. I'm sharing a story on how we can solve that together and how we can use technology to do that. So that's really the learning that I had. It's to shut up, to stop talking, to ask better questions, because look, I can sell, right? I think all of us in sales think that that's the thing that we need to do. Unfortunately, it is not. What we actually need to do is understand. Then we need to identify, and then
Mm,
we can start selling, because we can deliver the value for the pain.
yeah, that's awesome. I mean, understanding the pain points and figuring out, and it's not just about, the businesses. You have to establish a relationship and then try to figure out, okay, this is what their pain point is, and then establish something.
You
That
nailed it.
that's amazing. I really love that concept.
Hmm.
Then now I want to ask you about WLNC. We love no code.
Yeah.
That chapter has a lot going on.
Yeah.
You came in as head of sales during a US expansion
Yeah.
and a fundraising round. And
Yeah.
then the company got acquired by TopTool while you were
Yeah.
there.
Hmm.
And then the Russian invasion of Ukraine,
Yeah.
unfortunately
Crazy.
disrupted the European, tech ecosystem the company was connected to. All roughly happened at the same time frame. Now, what was it like to try to build a sales motion through all of that?
Ooh, I want to add one more layer to this. Okay.
Okay.
90% of the people who were on my team did not speak English. Yeah. So we had a lot of communication stuff that we had to work ourselves through. And so, we had to build technology and a roadmap along the way. It was really challenging. When I started, our churn was crazy. I want to say 35%, maybe bigger. So we had a lot of technology and deliverability problems to work out. We had a lot of selling motions to work out. The language is just one small piece of it. But really, what did I do? It's what I do in every single motion. First, I focus on the stuff I can control. I actually take a step back, a rather large one. And I sometimes, most of the time, sit in the sales seat. So I'll actually start in the sales motion, understanding what that looks like. I'll pick up a phone, I'll go outbound, I'll build value propositions. And I'll do that alongside of sales development reps, marketing, and then I'll sit inside a customer service onboarding. I'll actually go through the entire sales process and the funnel all together with all of my reps. I'll start in the top, in the middle, and in the front. So I can understand where all of the areas that we need to fix are. Rather than pretending I might know, I actually sit in the seat. I do that for about 30 days. Then I just identify and attack on the things that I can do. I start with the top funnel first. That's value propositions, ICP, our segmentation, what our discovery call looks like, all the top funnel stuff. Then we focus on building value and pain inside the discovery call, building velocity, moving them through that motion. Then we got to build all the other stuff to keep our customers happy, which is
Yeah.
great technology, the people to deliver that, the customer service, the ensuring that people are utilizing it. The list is long, but the biggest thing I always say in those environments is just to do one thing, and that's focus on the stuff that you can control every single day,
Yeah.
making that the focus of all the things that you do. And if you focus on your customers, most importantly, and their satisfaction, you're going to win every single time. So I would sit inside of customer service calls every single day for the first 60 days just to ensure that my customers were happy with what we were delivering. And sales was not over-promising and under-delivering and putting customer service in a big bind, which I've had happen quite a few times, especially when you have a bunch of folks trying to hit a number. They're throwing everything over the wall to try and see what they can get in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure on all sides. So
Yeah.
it's a nice, smooth cadence. That's what I focus on.
That's really amazing. I mean, so you were, if I, correct me if I'm wrong, so you were trying to actually create a playbook kind of a thing, if I understand correctly. So you try to figure out a pattern, like, so, okay, if when you're sitting in the value proposition, when you were sitting in the customer's call, trying to figure out what were were you trying to like figure out the patterns? Because that's how you will you can devise a workflow or a playbook which you could adopt every time. That was the main
They had
idea.
yeah, great questions, right? So, yeah, they definitely had sales motions. They had all the motions to get somebody through a funnel. But were they actually solving a customer's real problems in the beginning of that first conversation? Then did we understand what the problem was? And did we execute on that? Like, those are the motions that really actually build velocity inside of your movement. We Love No Code is a really cool product. A lot of people would just buy it because it was cost effective. And a lot of founders know that they need that. We would specifically go into this space where somebody might have just gotten a seed round, a series A round, or B or C, and they have some leading indicators that they need to execute on. Some of those are building new products, some of those are building new features, all of these things. And if I can bring a subscription-based service for application building, I mean, that's music to a founder's ears. So we would get a lot of brand new customers. Unfortunately, after 90 days, we wouldn't keep them because we weren't actually delivering on what we said we were going to be doing in sales. So I had to slow things down to speed things up. We interjected some technology to help us do that. Some videoing, checking in and checking out, some cool stuff inside of our platform to make it more cross-functional so our people can check in and check out of each one of the projects, making it stickier, giving it that product-led growth. So a lot of those things needed to be built. The value propositions were there, but they weren't any good, right? We weren't asking good questions. We were just asking really surface level stuff. We weren't getting granular on the why. Like, what happens if this doesn't happen?
Yeah.
Now we're actually building real value. We're understanding product roadmaps, and we're even slowing down. So our customers that we're winning aren't thinking about the next 90 days with us. They're thinking about every sprint and every iteration that they're actually doing in their technology. And then we're becoming an embedded service with them rather than a subscription, a line item.
Okay. That's interesting. Then at some point after all of that, you decided to build your own thing, right? So what made GTM Dart the right next move? And why that problem? Because why the founder led to sales led transitions specifically?
Well, it's a great question. It's because all I did for a couple years was talk to founders, whether that be them building their applications or building some motion. When I was at Backendless, working through We Love No Code, I built some partnerships. We started to build all these things, and I'm noticing all these big problems, and nobody knows how to fix them the right way. There's a lot of over engineering in the sense of a GTM movement. A lot of people think they need a lot of things.
Yeah.
They actually
Okay.
don't. Okay. What they need is some direction and some go. And they need to understand the pains that they solve. So every day I was taking all of these meetings with everybody from a product leader to a founder to asking them what pains they're going to be solving inside their application and what pains they solve for their customers and what do they do for this. And often the answer is, well, I think what we do is this. And, everybody really likes this thing. Nobody could outright tell me what they're doing. So with GTM Dart, we wanted to go and solve for this problem. Obviously, We Love No Code got bought by Talto. So I had a bunch of partnerships and
Mhm.
things in my hands. I also had a bunch of account executives who I just hired and trained, which were great. So what we did was just go outbound and start building things for some of our.
That's great. Now let's go a little deep on that problem. I really want to because from the outside, the founder led to sales led transition. It sounds more like a hiring problem. We need to bring in some salespeople, but
I love
that's
that.
not really what's happening, right? Like just what you said that people think that they need to do a lot of things to actually make it work. So I want to know your secret. Like, what is actually happening? What is it?
Yeah, I love that, right? Like a founder comes to us often and they'll say, hey, I need to hire a bunch of account executives. I've got my product ready. I've got some money. I want to go get some new customers. I say to them, go. Talk to you later. Call me in 6 months because they're going to fail inevitably often because really they need to take a step back. Have they ever done the selling motion before? And do they have a repeatability process yet? Because often I hear executives and, CEOs going to market and founders, and they want that account executive to build that motion out for them. You're
Hmm.
going to hire somebody who makes $60,000 to $70,000 a year to build out your entire business and know everything that you just spent 10 years of the last whatever of your life building, right? And studying sounds like a disaster. Really, what we need to do is take a big giant step back before we get into that motion. And the real problem that's happening is we just need to settle into asking some hard questions. What pains do you solve for your customers? If you can't answer 5 to 10 pains that you physically solve for your customers, then you are not there yet. You need to go ask your customers. You need to make your product better. You need to get a better brand or messaging. All of those things need to happen. Once you have that, then you need to get to repeatability on who your ICP is and then who you're going to talk to. And then you need to bridge that gap between pain and your ideal customer profiles.
Hmm.
Then we go to market. How do we get to 10 customers? Like, let's just focus on that. Okay. Get to repeatability. How do we build value propositions, solve those pains, and then keep our customers? Let's not leave it up to our SDRs and our account executives to keep our customers, to build our playbooks, to build our value propositions, and to have a bunch of hope. By the way, that'll take them 7 months to find out if any of that's going to work. With GTM Dart, we can do that in 30 days. I build value propositions with you right away. We go outbound. We find some data sets. We physically pick up the phone and we bring you into those conversations with us. So we can work hard to build that repeatability with you. Then we can do the next move. Many, many years ago, I had a sales coach. Her name is Colleen Stanley, and she wrote a book. It's called The Emotional Intelligence for Sales Success, and she's in Lakewood, Colorado. And every time when I worked at my first job, KPA, that paper-based company, she would do all the training for sales, right, when I first started. And her golden rule was to follow the process. When you're in sales, you must follow the process. You don't go straight to the end to try and close them, because then they have no value. And what's the point, right? They churn, they leave, whatever. So you must follow the steps of understanding, building value, then business plan, then close, and moving them through that process. Same goes with building your organization, by the way. You don't get to skip any of the steps. You must do all of them. Then you get to have the fruits of your labor, which is closed won business and keeping your customers.
So it's more like it's almost like a sequence, if I'm gathering it properly. So why do you think what are the most common ways you see companies get the sequence wrong here? What are the specific failure models that show up over and over, but the companies don't see it through?
Yeah, I love this question, really particular. I'm working with a couple customers right now facing this problem. They've spent the last 14 months, they've hired 2 CROs each. Ooh, you know how much a CRO costs?
Yes.
So expensive.
Yes.
Plus, that's 14 months of no selling, no closing any business. You're burning cash on top of that, and you're not executing anything. Okay. That's all they were doing. These CROs, one of them wrote a book.
Okay.
That was their marketing move. I'm going to get a bunch of leads. I'm going to write a book. Okay. Guess how many deals they closed? 0. Okay. The next one was another CRO. They didn't write a book, but they are old school, unfortunately, and just did emails and some outbound campaigns and picked up the phone a couple times to people that they emailed in their space. Closed 0 deals as well, because they don't know how to get to repeatability. Neither one of those folks. Okay. They've always inherited something. Maybe 20 years ago, they got a lead list and a phone and eventually got their way to a CRO role, but they've never actually built anything from 0. How do we get to repeatability? So what does that start with? Actually doing the work, unfortunately. You need to call your 100 customers. You need to get to a law of average. You need to understand if your value propositions are actually working in market. Then you need to get into a discovery call, and you need to see if your product is even sticky and people actually want it. And if you can't do any of those and you can't move them through that process, then you're not a CRO. So unfortunately, a lot of these folks and these CROs are burning $40,000 to $50,000 of these organizations burn money, and they don't have a lot. So when I come in and I do a assessment of what has gone on, I have to start all over. I actually have to take a step back from what the CRO actually did, because he didn't do the hard work. He just created a bunch of really noisy emails and created this idea inside of these founders' brain that this is the way forward. So now I have to rewire your brain. Now I have to rewire all your tech stack. Then I have to rewire your value propositions, because it's all fuzzy. And it doesn't actually solve any of the pains that are inside of it. Then I actually need to start going outbound. So it's a lot of work.
Yes, it's like starting from ground zero, right? I mean, even with 14 months of no sale, there's pretty much no gain happening in those 14 months, no
Well, now
learning,
they're
as you
even
said,
more
no
desperate, right?
repeatability.
And everything I do is even scarier to them. So, if I'm saying I need to spend $500 on something like, a cold calling application or data, they freak out when they just spent $40,000 to a CRO who just sat in a seat for 14 months writing a book.
They were burned, so now they want to make sure that each and every step they are very cautious about. Okay, now I know you talk about the 5 components of a revenue engine, like the branding, marketing, sales, customer success, the rev ops. Now, when you go into a new engagement, now which of those you find is usually the weakest link? Is it always the same one? Do you see a pattern or repeatability in that? Like, or does it depend on, the kind of company you're targeting?
Always the kind of company, but often it's the top of the funnel and then the transition from closed one to customer service and implementation. Like this little thing right here always seems to be a rat's nest. The top of the funnel is part of the problem too, by the way. I want to say that
Yeah.
very clearly, because
Yeah.
that means that we're not doing a good job on the sales side, setting expectations, finding the true pain, helping our customers understand what we're going to solve for them, all that stuff that gets to this next close one stage. So there's a lot of things that can go real wrong real quick in those two movements. So I really focus on those, right? Like, what does our close one transition look like? What does our pre-call stuff look like? What are we doing inside of our discovery call? And then, what's our leave behinds and like, how are we doing that motion? All sorts of fun stuff. But yeah, those are the two spaces I really focus on.
Okay. Now, out of all of these, I would like to spend a minute on one of them, the
Please.
RevOps. Because I think it's the one that's most invisible until something breaks,
You nailed it.
right? So, what does RevOps actually look like inside a company at, say, to give you an example, like 2 to 5 million ARR that hasn't gotten it right yet? Where do you think these, these process gaps or what is the reality of RevOps at that scale?
One of the linchpins, right? Almost before an SDR or top funnel movements.
Yeah.
Like it's that kind of thing. It's busy versus productive. It's almost like that noise. You don't want noise. How can we reduce noise? RevOps is the key right there to reducing friction and noise in the top of the funnel and through the rest of the sales process as well, right? Key understanding along the way. So I know I mentioned the top of the funnel and customer service, but you're absolutely right. RevOps is a huge portion of it. I'm going to say this out loud and, I'm old school, so I can say it, I guess. I come from the days when we never got RevOps until, maybe 6 or 7 years ago when we started to get RevOps. We used to have to be the guy who wore 3 hats, right? We got marketing and we got RevOps and we got sales manager here. So we used to have to do it all. I am blessed that RevOps exists because, man, am I impatient in a lot of ways. And RevOps is really, if you can have a RevOps partner inside of an ecosystem for sales, it's the most important thing besides having, a great lead flow funnel.
And you, of course, think that's because the lot of gaps you see, is it because of the system fragmentation?
Nailed it. Yeah. So I'll tell you, right? So think about what a sales rep gets in their seat. So they'll have 5, maybe 6 different systems that they have to touch, right? So right now my reps have Apollo, Trellis, then they have a HubSpot, then they've got an email, they've got all these things. And then, by the way, we've got AI now, right? So we've got this, I like to call it the Iron Man suit that should hopefully be talking to all these things one day. So we only have one thing. That's my ideal space to be living in. But you nailed it, right? So many things are disconnected. 10, maybe longer ago than that, when I was at Exactly, we used to make these sales videos all the time. And they were for our SKO, it's like these stupid sales videos. And our manager would be in them. And like he used to have this go-to line after every conversation you had with him. Didn't matter what it was. And the one thing he would close every conversation is it in Salesforce? That was it. Like that's how he would close it. Because if it's not in the CRM, it doesn't exist. If it's not in this, it doesn't exist. If it's not in that, like, man, so many clicks. How can we reduce the clicks?
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
intense. Yeah. So you nailed it, right? RevOps is the one who weaves the story for the sales rep. Really. It's almost like the family ecosystem kind of for the sales rep. It's their mom, their dad, their all those things that kind of make sure that they're going to be safe throughout their day.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's such an important point, and you put it out in such a clear and in such a nice way. I think it definitely resonates with anyone who hears that and working in that space. Now, you operate also as an embedded partner across like multiple organizations simultaneously. So you're inside Rent My Equipment, Construct Network, Bears Development concurrently. And In our pre-call, you mentioned stand-ups, right? You're running stand-ups across these engagements. Now, I want to sit with that for a second. Like, are you running a separate stand-up for each embedded client? Like, what does that actually look like week to week? Because it's like constant like context switching, the prep, keeping each engagement thread straight. How does it?
It's very difficult, and I've been doing it for 3 years, 4 years, 4.5 years now. So that's the only reason why I can do it. And I do it through calendar blocking. So I got to do lots of things to ensure I do that. So first, let's answer the first question. Yes, everybody gets their own stand-up. Everybody gets their own Slack channel. They get their own everything. Everything is in their own ecosystem, because at the end of the day, I want my customers to be left with all of these things, whether that be the value propositions and the way that we talk inside of Slack and the way that we make sure that we're all accountable, all those things. We want to create that kind of accountability culture across the board. Same goes with how we develop our systems, whether that's our value propositions or things I like to call closing the loop, and like all these science of sales things that are really important. I want to keep that inside of this ecosystem for each one of my customers. So we ensure that we do that. And how does it work? Lots of systems. So every single day inside of my stand-up, we walk through the start, stop, and continues of the worlds, but we also do cold call reviews in every single stand-up. We really want to get granular with overcoming objections and understand where we get stuck every single day. Our mantra here is to just get better every day. So if we book 5 meetings the day before, we want to book 6. If our data isn't good and the list is long, but we're always making sure that we're at peak performance here at GTM Dart. We also really want our CEOs and executives to understand the cadences and things that really takes to build an engine like this, because I'm going to give you the key. And to do that, you need to understand the motions. So we want you to be inside of it. And I learned through osmosis. I don't know about you.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's a scientific term you just used right there. I love it.
The
Seeping
art of
through.
doing, right? Yeah. We got to do it together. And that's really, I want my C-level executives to be on my right shoulder or my left shoulder. And then we go into battle together, right? Because often these are, engineering minded or product minded. I have one of my customers, man, he'll hand you a sales deck that's 44 pages long. There's no way you're ever going to get through that, because he does agentic AI. Like, he's so excited to talk about it, right? And so involved in the data that he's going to give you. Man, that's going to go over everybody's head. Nobody's going to learn anything from that. So we just need to focus on the pain. So often it's reeling them back in a little bit, helping them understand what the sales motion is, understanding what velocity is. And to do that, we put you in the seat alongside me and my team.
So that must require a lot of coordination, right? I mean, there are so many things, reporting, updates, keeping context across organizations. That's amazing. I don't know how you're managing all that. That's really cool. Yeah.
Not everybody sees everything, but I definitely do. So, no.
That's amazing. I think that's, it shows what kind of a philosophical system GTM Dart is working on. It definitely has, it's a foolproof system, so that I'm sure the clients are getting a very validated and very thorough, comprehensive package from GTM Dart. Now, I want to switch the gears a little bit here and come back to, the AI part of it. I know I told you we would come back to it. Again, about your coding, that AI will never really take your job ever, but it will make you better at everything. Now, I want to unpack that with you.
Yeah.
Because the better at everything part, now what does that actually look like inside a GTM motion? Now, you have been public about the idea that, the most practical near-term value of AI and go-to-market is not automation. It's market and buyer's intelligence. Getting smarter about your ICP, reading intent signals, understanding the competitive positioning faster. Now, is that the better at everything you mean, or is it something totally different?
I think that's definitely part of it. That's what I get before I even show up to my seat in my morning. I wake up every single morning and I talk to my AI while I'm at the gym to build out the things that I want to ensure I succeed in my day. whether that be going after home services today. For 20 minutes, talked up chat this morning while I was at the gym. And by the time I got to the desk, I had an awesome target list and we went outbound. Here we go. So those are really succinct data kind of things that we can do, but there's a lot of other really powerful things that help me. Remember, I've got to compartmentalize all this stuff with these different customers that I have, but also I have people that are on the spectrum of sales all over the place from day one to, 7 years. So how do I enable all of these people really well? Well, we start to build connections inside of things like Slack using our AI to tap into things like my Google Drive, which actually has documentation where they can actually go ahead and help themselves to utilize best practices or templated emails. And then I use AI inside of my listening for my outbound phone calls, which actually is auto creating emails for the follow up. And then when my rep gets in for the very next day, it already tells them exactly who they need to reach out to first from the 3 days ago. I don't even need my rep to put it into the CRM. Could you imagine if I got to do that 10 years ago? Man, I'd be on cloud 9. There's so many other facets of it, right? Great example is pre-call information, where I need to be a knowledge expert pretty quickly, where I can present some cases or value propositions that might be good. As a reminder, I have, a few different customers who are in all sorts of different places. So I better get it right. Okay. I'll tell you an experience a week ago where I got it wrong.
Okay. Would love to hear that.
I showed up to a meeting and I put the wrong email inside my meeting on top of another email. So there was 2 emails. By the way, the people in the meeting both had the same first name. Okay. Utterly confused. My AI, for some reason, didn't pick it up because I just switched over to a new AI for my meetings. So last week I switched over to a new one. Anyway, long story short, I show up to this meeting and I have a 30-minute meeting with somebody about the wrong thing the whole time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did it go?
Not good. But the craziest part is they didn't correct me at any moment in time. They didn't correct me on anything in the meeting. They just went through the meeting. I didn't even notice until the end of my day when I was doing my end of day notes and I was doing my end of day follow-up. And I was like, that's weird. I didn't think this person was until tomorrow. And then I noticed that both people have the exact same first name. I should have closed this. Now I notice that I really screwed up and I start to try and fix my problem. So to answer your question, AI can help in a lot of ways, right? But it also makes me think it's got me all the time. It's got me that I got it. So I definitely need to still utilize all the parts of my brain that I know I have and to triple check everything before I get into things. But hopefully that story helps everybody laugh a little bit. Yeah.
No, I think I love that part. I'm definitely going to put that in a clip, This is something what you just said, like, oh my God, I'm sure
I'll send it to the person who was in the meeting I'll send your clip to the person who was in the meeting for 30 minutes and didn't say anything.
That's hilarious. Oh my God.
I promise I'm going to. Yeah. Great.
I'm definitely going to put this, but you're so right. I mean, we are so much into AI. We trust it so much, but we need to validate.
Totally.
You said you need to. You still need. They need validation. Of course, AI hallucination. That's a different thing, but this is a different context altogether. But my God, that's so funny. And again, that's such an important point. Now, you've also said, and this resonates with me, that automation applied to a broken process just produces broken output faster. But that's a line, right? Yeah. That's a line I want to put on a wall somewhere, honestly, because what does that look like in practice? Now, can you give me like a real example of a company that tried to automate before the process was right and it made things worse? If you can share some examples.
Yeah. So there's something I talk about a lot, and it's this theory of busy versus productive, right? And AI can make you real busy, right? And it can make you think that you're doing all these things and you're being productive. But often, if you don't know what you're doing, it's futile, okay? And I'll give you a couple examples. One would be I had a customer of mine a few months back. They're an AI website builder and they want to go compete against all these other website builders that are out there. It's a dime a dozen nowadays. It's the fastest way to get to zero in this space. But they knew that they had the most cost effective plan that was out there, all these bells and whistles. So they actually got Claude to build a crawler for the internet, go find every website they could find that was broken and needed some help. Sounds cool, right? Millions of websites. So they started to go outbound. They appended the data and started doing all sorts of stuff and started calling them. Very expensive movement. Out of all of those calls, they booked many, many, many meetings. Unfortunately, they were with the wrong ICP. These are people who unfortunately don't have a lot of money to be buying websites. And most importantly, the customer they were trying to get to was somebody who wanted to spend money on SEO and paid ads. These people actually wanted to pay $10 for a website. That's what they actually wanted to pay for. They didn't want to buy any ads. So they filled their entire funnel with terrible ICP, awful customers who all churned 4 months. They had maybe $10,000 in MRR that they got out of this, but they spent about 20 times X that. Most importantly, they wasted 6 months and tons of revenue dollars on just the human capital side of things, of implementing and doing all these things. So that's that busy versus productive. They really didn't take a step back, understand who their actual buyer was, really understand who's spending the money on the SEO. And that's who their actual buyer was. We went in after that 6 months and fixed the problem. We actually went in and did some really cool stuff going after their ICP who's already using technology that was more expensive than theirs, but still spending money on SEO. And that's who we went after.
That's something like, those are such like important and valid points. I mean, using the agentic AI workflows, we think that we can build a cool N8N workflow where we can scrape all possible leads in the world and, try to target them, outreaching sequences and all that. But the most critical point is you're figuring out your correct ICP. That's like something which needs to be nailed down at the very beginning. So what you just said, like getting the right sequence, that's like one of the most crucial things anyone to start thinking about outreach or thinking about any other way of scaling. Now,
Simply it would have just taken, if that organization would have taken a step back and actually sat in the sales seat while they were doing that motion, they would have found out that these customers don't spend any money on SEO in their discovery call. They could have saved themselves 6 months. They would have understand that by asking a smarter question, tell me what you spent in the last 3 months on paid ads, or asking better questions and building a better sales motion would have been better. All of this noise.
absolutely. Now, that comes to my next question here. Like, where are you seeing in your experience with customers that AI actually delivers ROI for your clients? Like, not the promise, the actual numbers and actual outcomes.
I love this, right? It's the ones around the data really I see making a big difference. Things that would take humans a ton of time to do, or even regular computing would take a ton of time to do. When we're doing that deep research or trying to solve for complex problems, whether that be your MCP or all the way down into something as simple as your Amazon order. I like to talk about that one. Amazon technology that's moving through, agentic AI through that. There's all sorts of really interesting things that are out there that are solving complex problems. And I think that's really it. When we're talking about where I'm seeing the most movement, it's around that data set. So understanding your customers better data, understanding, your product data better, understanding persona data better, stuff around that. And then you can get even more granular from there.
I see. Now, if I ask you, in terms of GTM Dart, like where do you think GTM Dart goes in the next 3 years if AI gets deeply embedded, in how companies build and run their revenue motions? Like what does the revenue stack look like in 2028 for you?
Yeah, I love it. Hopefully the Iron Man suit for the rep, one that he puts on, and then in the top right-hand corner, he's got all of his meetings for the day. Before each one of the meetings, it pops up what the reframe and what the value proposition is before each one of those. And it does that when he's doing his outbound and calling, and also maps his ICP and starts doing all these things. We're nearly there. I'm, every day working my way through my MCP and Apollo and all these things I'm learning on my own. And it's really powerful stuff. But I think that's where it's going today. And in 2028, that's where it should be. It should be in that Iron Man cadence kind of suit. We know who our customers are. We can build a value proposition for them in real time using their pains, and I can hand it to them and I can tell them exactly what their ROI is going to be based on just historical, remember, data, right? Because data is going to be that big, powerful thing. And I'm already seeing that today with some of my customers, right? They can use their agentic AI and tell you immediately. So pretty cool.
Yeah. That's amazing, right? I mean, that's what machine learning, and that's like constantly you're putting, there's already historical data available. The important thing is for your agentic AI to give it the right direction based on data and not just based on, hypothesis here.
You nailed it.
Now, I'm going to come back to you as a founder for a second. You spent 20 plus years building expertise inside other people's companies. Now you have built GTM Dart. Now, what does the next chapter look like for you personally? Does GTM Dart stay focused boutique, or is there a bigger version you're thinking of?
I'm always here for the biggest version possible, but I really want to stay centered around the problems that we solve, which is executing the actual plan. And I think that's the biggest differentiator. A lot of people are in a consulting movement where they hand you a stack of papers and some directives. Here, we hand you that stack of papers, but we actually do the directive. We actually do the work. So that's the biggest differentiator between us and a lot of the other organizations that are out there. What do I see? Us embedding into larger organizations, from them removing their sales outbound motions altogether, which I've seen across a lot of boards, from e-commerce to SaaS. The list is long. When we can, put a dial on sales, cool, I need this much today, I need this much tomorrow. It really allows the organization to have things that are scalable through seasonalities. Those seasonalities might be trade shows, it might be a marketing event, it might be a new product launch. So how can you have seasonality on the sales side and work with an organization like GTM Dart? And you reduce a lot of that risk, right? And that bloat as well through that seasonality. So I'm hoping that that's where we're going. I'm hoping all my reps get that Iron Man suit and we become embedded even more. That's what I want.
That's a great vision to have. So is it fair enough to say, is that what keeps you up at night about GTM Dart, or is there even another spectacular version you're thinking of?
Only thing that really keeps me up at night is, like, I just remember a couple of experiences in my sales career where I never got any help. I never got any direction. And I think that's what I lean on the most, where I had somebody who just didn't teach me anything. And the FullContact API company, that was one of them, where I just had to figure it out because nobody knew what API was. So I never want one of my reps, one of my founders, or anybody to be in this lost land where they don't know what's going on. I want to give them some direction. And that's really what keeps me up at night. Do my people know what they need to do today? Are they enabled to do it? And do they know why?
So creating like a playbook for people to use that when you are basically doing the more important stuff, but there are people who can follow and like kind of replicate what you have been doing, right, in a more efficient way, instead of that's a very honest and a very I feel a very, very valid concern, I would say. Last question on this, because I would really want to, since you pointed this out, that this is something you were not taught in FullContact company. And I ask this to a lot of people because, so what's that one thing you now know about building and scaling revenue motions that you wish someone had told you at the start of your career?
You selling is the last thing that you should do. You understanding your customer's pain is the most important thing that you do. I think that is just the linchpin, right? That everybody gets lost in for the first, I think, maybe 2 years of their sales career. They're like, oh, I got this cool one-liner. I know it's going to be great. Or I got this cool, man, the way I say this sounds pretty, elegant. Unfortunately, none of that matters. If you would have just listened a little bit better, positioned your value better, that would have been
Yeah.
a better move. The last one would be there are no shortcuts. Yeah. And my science teacher when I was in elementary school taught me this, that there are no shortcuts in nature. It will always win no matter what. And I
Yeah.
use that kind of methodology in sales. There's
Hmm.
no shortcuts here. Everything is very black and white. There is no gray area, unfortunately. Either you made the call or you didn't. Either you closed the deal or you didn't. Either you understand or you don't.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so amazed at, your how clear your thought process is, because you've just like nailed down the exact points where people can get it wrong, especially in the sales motion. Because anyone in their initial stage, they would feel, oh, this is something this should be easy. But unless you understand the dynamics of it, like how you did by going in to a company's every single segment, figuring out their pain point, figuring out how each cycle works. It's just not possible to, get through a proper sales motion, get effective and get repeatable.
You know that.
Yeah, so I think that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that amazing, and I loved your analogy on your science teacher as well. You need to get your hands dirty. You need to get into the grind and then learn from it. There's no shortcut. There's absolutely no shortcut.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't be a doctor and not go get your education, unfortunately. Yeah, you got to understand the science before you could start opening people up.
Absolutely. Wow, another good one. Okay. So, Brent, this has been a genuinely great conversation.
Oh,
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've been,
man.
thinking about this founder led to sales led problem for a long time. And now I feel like, I get the picture, maybe, not how as, not probably the perfect way as you get it, but I still see the mental model somewhere and I get, where it actually breaks. And that's rare. So, before I
Thanks.
let you go, where can people find you and GTM Dart if they want to connect or learn more about it?
Yeah, you can find us at gtmdart.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, those wonderful social networks, or you can just give me a call whenever you want. I'm here to help. Okay.
Perfect. Now that's a wrap on today's episode of The Real AI by ActNow 360. Um, and we had one of the most wonderful guests ever, Brent Haldiman. Thank you so much for coming
Thank
and
you.
making a great episode. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I
See
really
you in the
appreciate
next
it.
one.
Cheers. Yeah. Bye.